Hello, this is Professor James Strickler, and this is a course in American government. This lesson from Unit 4 about the legislative branch is Lesson 4 about powers denied to the legislative branch. In this lesson, you'll learn about Article 1, Section 9 of the Constitution. You'll learn about powers denied regarding slavery importation, powers denied regarding criminal process, taxes that the legislature was forbidden from imposing, and titles of nobility that the legislature was forbidden to bestow. In previous lessons, we learned about how in Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution, the powers of legislation are bestowed upon Congress. Specifically, it says that Congress shall have power to, and then it provides a whole list of things that Congress may enact laws concerning. We've previously seen this list, which contains all the powers granted to Congress, all the things that Congress can make laws about. In the very next section of Article 1, Section 9, it then lists exceptions to the powers granted to Congress. In other words, things that the Congress could normally do, maybe presume to do under the powers they'd been granted, but for one reason or another, the people who wrote the Constitution wanted to deny Congress the ability to actually do those things. One of the areas where Congress was denied the power to do something that it otherwise could do under an enumerated power of Article 1, Section 8 concerns slavery importation. Recall that in Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution, Congress is granted the power to regulate commerce with foreign nations. This would seem to include the ability then to decide whether or not slaves can be imported from other countries. But in Article 1, Section 9, it specifically denied Congress the power to ban the slave trade with other countries for 20 years after the Constitution was ratified. This is a denial of power that we previously mentioned in the course as one of the compromises that was made at the Constitutional Convention. Of course, it's a power that a denial of power that doesn't really matter now, since slavery is no longer constitutionally allowed in the United States of America because of the 13th Amendment. Another area in which Congress was denied powers by Article 1, Section 9 concerns criminal processes. One of those criminal processes that Article 1, Section 9 denied Congress concerning is that of habeas corpus. Here's the part of Article 1, Section 9 where it says that a writ of habeas corpus shall not be suspended by Congress, except during times of rebellion or invasion. To understand what this means, you need to know that the term habeas corpus literally means to present the body. It's a Latin phrase, and it has a deep history in the government of Great Britain prior to the founding of the United States of America. The idea of habeas corpus is that when a government official arrests somebody and puts them in jail or in prison, that person has a right to request a hearing before a court to decide whether they are being detained legitimately. This request is for a writ, which means an order from a court, that is then sent to whoever's holding them in jail, demanding that they present the body. In other words, bring the physical person before the judge so the judge can question them and talk about why they are in jail and determine whether or not he believes they are being legitimately held. The judge then has the power to release them. So what this passage in the Constitution in Article 1, Section 9 says is that Congress cannot eliminate the writ of habeas corpus except during a time of rebellion or invasion. This goes to then Congress's powers to set rules for the kind of cases that the courts can hear on appeal. So in this way, normally you would think that Congress could potentially limit habeas corpus, but the Constitution says no, they can't, because this was considered one of the most fundamental rights that people had to ensure that the government couldn't just throw someone in jail and keep them in there without them ever having a day in court to determine whether or not they were being held legitimately. Another thing that's denied in Article 1, Section 9 regarding judicial or court processes or a process of dealing with criminals, is a denial of the power of Congress to issue what are known as bills of attainder. Now, that's a phrase that we don't commonly use today, a name for something that you wouldn't just hear in casual conversation. So to understand what this is actually doing, you need to know what a bill of attainder is. It's a law that's declaring a particular person, or perhaps a small group of people, guilty of a crime and assigning a punishment to them. Notice that it's a law passed that declares they are criminals and assigns a punishment, rather than going through a court process of having their evidence presented and being found guilty by a jury or anything like that. Congress just simply says, these are bad people, throw them in jail. The Constitution in Article 1, Section 9 denies Congress the power to do that. While they may be able to make criminal laws in other areas, they certainly can't just throw someone in jail because they want to. Now, that may seem an odd thing to say that Congress can't do. You may think, well, of course they can't do anything like that. But like other protections found in Article 1, Section 9, such as the denial, not allowing Congress to deny habeas corpus, these things were included because they were things that were actually done to the American colonists by the British government prior to the American Revolution. And they didn't want the government in the United States of America to be able to repeat these same abuses of power. The next example of this, also an item of criminal process that was regulated by Article 1, Section 9, is that Congress is not allowed to pass ex post facto laws. An ex post facto law is a law that requires that somebody be punished for some particular thing that was committed prior to the thing being declared illegal. So, for example, let's say that a speed limit is changed on the interstate. And prior to it being changed, you can drive 75 miles an hour in an area. And so you drive 75 miles an hour, and then the next day it's reduced to 65. And then if you received a ticket the next day in the mail saying, well, you went 75 miles an hour on the interstate, you might say, but wait a minute, I did it before the speed limit was lowered. Well, an ex post facto law would allow them to punish you anyway for things that you did before they were made illegal. Again, that's something that was done by the British government to the colonists during the period before the American Revolution. And so they put it in the United States Constitution that their own government couldn't do it to them. Another area in which powers are denied by Article 1, Section 9 concerns taxes. First of all, Article 1, Section 9 says that Congress can't impose any direct taxes on people. The most obvious example of a direct tax is an income tax, where rather than the national government telling a state that they have to supply so much money, then them figuring out how to do it, or the government taxing a particular activity such as exporting or importing something. Instead, they simply say to the person, you have to directly pay us taxes based on what you have, like income earned. Well, those sorts of direct taxes were prohibited by the United States Constitution. Now, this was changed, though, later. While Congress was originally prohibited from imposing an income tax, in 1913, the 16th Amendment was added to the Constitution, which allowed Congress to collect taxes on income directly from citizens of the United States of America. Without this amendment being added, we would not have a national income tax today. When Congress originally began collecting income tax under this amendment, at the time it was assumed that this would be a small amount of taxation imposed only upon the highest wage earners in the country. But it now has become the primary way that the national government funds what it does. A second kind of tax prohibited by Article 1, Section 9 is taxes on exports. Now, in general, Congress is granted power in Article 1, Section 8 to impose taxes. But as you can see, Article 1, Section 9 then creates some exceptions to this granted power. They can't collect taxes directly from people, such as an income tax, nor can they collect taxes on things being exported, in other words, sent out of state. So while they cannot tax exports, they are allowed, though, to tax imports. Those kind of taxes are what we call tariffs. So the national government can tax goods coming into the United States of America, but not tax goods going out. Another area where Article 1, Section 9 denies power to the United States Congress concerns titles of nobility. It says that no titles of nobility will be granted in the United States. When we say titles of nobility, we're talking about things like king, queen, prince, princess, baron, earl, duke, things like that. The United States Constitution prohibits Congress from giving anyone those sorts of titles. This was done to prevent the creation of a royal aristocracy or oligarchy in the United States of America, where there would be certain people who would be considered by their titles to be superior to others. So Article 1, Section 9 has among the powers that it denies Congress the banning of slave importation, the suspending of habeas corpus, the passing of bills of attainder or ex post facto laws, the laying of direct taxes, most obviously the income tax, although that was later changed by the 16th Amendment, or imposing taxes on exports, or granting titles of nobility. So now let's review what we learned in this lesson. Where are exceptions to Congress's powers contained in the Constitution? In Article 1, Section 8, Article 1, Section 9, Article 1, Section 10, or Article 1, Section 7. They are found in Article 1, Section 9, which is immediately after Article 1, Section 8, where you've learned several times in this course already, the powers are granted to Congress to do certain things. Then immediately after, in Article 1, Section 9, exceptions to those grants of power are created. What does habeas corpus mean? Does it mean legal slavery? Does it mean that something cannot be outlawed? Does it allow something to happen without taxes? Or does it mean present the body? It means present the body. It means to literally bring somebody who's in prison before a judge, not a dead body, a live body, so that then the judge can decide whether or not they're being legitimately held. What is a bill of attainder? Is it a law to take property away? A law to punish one person? Charges for property used? Or charges for work done? It's a law to punish one person. That word bill there isn't about some charge that you have for something, money owed. It refers to a law. What is an ex post facto law? Is it something that punishes a thing already done? Or is it something that outlaws something without punishment? Or does it prohibit factions from forming in the country? Or is it a law that has been overturned, such as by a court? It's something that punishes a thing already done. What did the 16th Amendment allow? Did it allow writs of habeas corpus? Did it allow voting regardless of race? Did it allow a national income tax? Or did it allow the direct election of senators? The 16th Amendment allowed a national income tax, despite the prohibition in Article 1, Section 9 against direct taxes. What tax was Congress forbidden to impose by Article 1, Section 9? Tax on imports, tax on sales, a tax on patents, or a tax on exports. Article 1, Section 9 forbids Congress from placing a tax on exports, goods moving out of states to be sold elsewhere. What is an example of a title of nobility? Is it duke, senator, justice, or president? A duke is a title of nobility, and an example of the kind of things that Congress is not allowed to give people as titles, to set them apart and above everyone else. That does it for this lesson. Our next lesson will be from Unit 4. It'll be Lesson 5, about leaders of Congress.